From the campus of Brigham Young University in Provo, the Utah Debate Commission welcomes you to the 3rd Congressional District Candidates Debate.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's debate featuring candidates running to represent Utah's 3rd Congressional District in the United States Congress. I'm Leah Murray. It is my pleasure to moderate tonight's exchange sponsored by the Utah Debate Commission, an organization dedicated to educating voters and encouraging the civil exchange of ideas. Those invited to debate here tonight met the Utah Debate Commission qualifications to participate. They are Republican candidate Mike Kennedy and Democratic Party candidate Glenn Wright. If you are watching or listening live, you are welcome to send your reactions and questions for the candidates on social media using the hashtag UTDebates. During tonight's exchange, each candidate will have a predetermined time to respond to questions from me and from BYU students. On occasion, there will be rebuttal time. A random drawing held prior to the debate determined that Mr. Wright will get the initial response to the first question. We'll then alternate which candidate answers first on the remaining questions. All right, let's debate. Mr. Wright, why do you want this job, and why are you the most qualified person to represent Utah's 3rd District? You have a minute.
Thank you. I'm the most qualified for this position because of my background. I've flown two combat tours in Vietnam. Following that, I spent 30 years consulting with businesses all around the Western Hemisphere on issues of safety and loss control. I worked with Habitat for Humanity, building affordable housing. I served on the Summit County Council and with the Utah Association of Counties for 6 years. You're going to hear tonight from my opponent that he's going to protect your rights and protect you from government overreach. Well, his voting record does not reflect that. I invite all of you to join me on a path to freedom and prosperity. We will build a country with the economy that is built for the many, not just the few, protect your freedoms, and protect and improve our environment.
Thank you. Dr. Kennedy.
Leah, thank you for moderating this, and to the Utah Debate Commission, thank you very much for setting this up. I know it's a lot of work, and I'm grateful to be back at my alma mater. I've graduated twice from this university, and I've spent actually 10 years being a student here, and it's actually really nice to be here, and it's nice that they have a winning football team. Congratulations to the Cougs, and let's go get them tomorrow night. I'm Mike Kennedy, and I'd be honored to earn your vote. I'm a family doctor. I'm an attorney. I'm also a state legislator. For the past 10 years, I've actually been working on complex legislation in the state of Utah, and I've learned that by working together, we can solve the most complicated issues. It's been my privilege to be on the campaign trail these past several months and meeting many people all over the state at their doors, working the parades, and actually seeing the people face to face. And I want you to know that if you send me to Washington, D.C., I will work diligently, as I've worked my whole life, to serve you well, to make sure that our children and grandchildren have the United States of America that we all hope that they can have, a place that has freedom and an opportunity for all. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, the first question for you. A survey by the Utah Foundation found a major frustration for Utah voters in 2024 is a feeling that people elected to office pay more attention to special interests than to voters. How, as a member of Congress, would you seek to respond to this concern? You have a minute and a half.
The dysfunction in Washington is one of the greatest problems that we confront. The reality is it feels like a lot of our elected officials are more focused on two-year campaigns and fundraising than they are on actually solving problems. I'm the sort of person that loves complicated problems. As a family doctor on a regular basis, I'm confronted with complicated issues, and I believe that actually as we listen to people and try to work with them, we can find the answers to these issues. I want to build collaborative groups. I want to work with people that that are serious and like-minded to me, people that actually want to make Washington, D.C. work better. And frankly, I believe Washington, D.C. should be more reflective of Utah than the other way around. Utah does it well. We balance our budget. We focus on people and making sure that government stays out of the way of those that can innovate. And when it comes to Washington, D.C., we have so many massive problems that are created by our government. When it comes to the border, we can't seem to control a border. We can put a man on the moon, but we have a border that's as porous as any sort of sieve in a sink. And it's driving me crazy that a simple solution can't be brought to bear. We have inflation that's run amok by a government that is willing to spend money on problems that the money won't solve the problems, but we continue to throw money at it, like a dad just responding and giving kids money just because they ask, as if that's going to solve the problems. So when it comes to this, I'm a serious-minded person. I want to find solutions, and I want to work with people from all sides to try to find those solutions, those compelling issues that our country faces.
Okay, Mr. Wright.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes, of course. A survey by the Utah Foundation found a major frustration for Utah voters in 2024 is a feeling that people elected to office pay more attention to special interests than to voters. How, as a member of Congress, would you seek to respond to this concern?
Yes. I wonder why they spend so much time listening to special interests. It's all about the money that's involved in our election campaigns. Citizens United created massive cash flows in the campaigns, millions of dollars. I think we're going to spend $1 billion or more across the country this year. We have to have campaign finance reform to take big money interests out of the picture. Then maybe our elected representatives would actually not have to pay attention to that and get something done. How do we get things done? I spent 6 years working with the Utah Association of Counties, and I was typically the only Democrat in the room with a lot of really conservative county commissioners. We all got along with each other. I listened to their concerns. I know what they're concerned about. And while we didn't agree on all issues, we typically thought that we knew what the issue, we agreed on the issues, but not the solutions. And that's the first part to accomplishing things in Congress. I can work across the aisle. I've done it with Utah Association of Counties. And in fact, 2 of my conservative county commissioners are endorsing me for this race.
Okay, I want to just stay with this topic for a moment, Dr. Kennedy, and give you 30 seconds for a follow-up question. Given that some surveys show that nearly 3/4 of Americans have a negative view of the United States House and the Senate, what do you believe is the measure of a successful member of Congress? 30 seconds.
I think a successful measure, a measure of a successful congressperson is that they actually care about working on the issues, that they're willing to work with civility on the issues of the day and actually take ideas from anybody that's willing to contribute those ideas and work positively with people. And frankly, as a state legislator for the past 10 years, we've accomplished a lot of things in the state legislature that required all of us working together to accomplish those things. We've cut taxes in the state of Utah by $1 billion, and we've passed important legislation because we work together with civility and thoughtfulness on those important issues.
Okay, Mr. Wright, same question.
Yes, I think the first part of Senator Kennedy's answer was right. We need to pay attention to the issues. But his explanation that he learned that from working in the state legislature is kind of an oxymoron. The supermajority in the state legislature dominates everything. They make all the determinations within a Republican caucus, and people like Senator Kennedy are told how to vote.
So would you like to rebut Senator Kennedy?
The reality is with all due respect to the military service of my opponent, I really appreciate his service to our country and applaud him for that. But he's talking about things that he doesn't know anything about because he's never served in a legislative body in that fashion. And the idea that I'm told how to vote is frankly insulting. And he can suggest that if he wants. But that lack of civility is exactly what we don't need in Washington, D.C. The accusation and the suggestion that somebody with nefarious input is going to just take the recommendations or suggestions of leadership is entirely wrong, and I certainly would refute that claim that he's making.
Do I get a rebuttal to that?
Our next question is a student question. Savannah Pursglove, go ahead.
Given the rising concern about tenant rights and rental affordability in Provo, what regulations and reforms would you support to ensure a fair and equitable rental market in Provo for all residents?
So Mr. Wright's first on this one.
Oh, sure. That's primarily a state issue, and the state has created a lot of those problems by creating laws that are extremely skewed towards the landlord. Our 3-day eviction rule is ridiculous. We need to expand that. We need to protect tenants' rights. I've been involved in some affordable housing issues where there were some tenants in the Park City area where the landlord was getting ready to run through his 30-year commitment to keeping the housing affordable. And they were doing their best to evict clients. What we did in Summit County is we sent the health department out to inspect those properties, and we found a lot of problems with the properties that weren't the tenants' fault. So they had some benefits from county government to prevent them from being evicted. But the issue, really is a state issue, and they need to lighten up on the landlord protections. Some of the leaders, most of the leaders in the legislature are real estate developers, so they're taking care of their buddies.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy.
The housing crisis generally, and in this case, the rental crisis that we confront in the state of Utah is actually a problem that because it's a great state and a great place to live, we actually have a lot of people that want to come here and live here. And in fact, to that question, thank you very much for that. I have 8 children. Actually, 7 of them have either graduated or currently, I have 2 current students at BYU. And with deep sympathy, I was one of those students paying those rental fees. It was a lot cheaper back when I was going to school as well. And one of the issues that we confront is when government gets involved, we make it worse. We actually have some opportunities to expand land. That's a big issue in the state of Utah. Almost 70% of our land is constrained and controlled by the federal government. We can't build on 70% of our land. And if we were to follow Mike Lee's lead with the Houses Act, which he's proposed and is sitting in Congress at this point, which is an opportunity for local land authorities, counties and cities, to actually buy contiguous land and build houses as well as rental units on that land, we could actually resolve some of these issues. But once again, we confront the feckless nature of our Congress and the fact they can't seem to do anything right. So I'm a big fan of addressing the housing crisis, the rental crisis as well, and certainly want to address that. And I'd work with Senator Lee in passing the Houses Act. In addition, we need to reduce tariffs on these building materials and reduce taxes on building materials so that people can actually build and reduce costs ultimately for tenants and owners of these buildings.
Thank you. Mr. Wright, I wanted to stay with this topic, so 30-second follow-up. High housing prices frustrate Utah voters in their effort to secure homes for their families. What can Congress do? What role does Congress play in increasing home affordability for Utahns?
Thank you. I wish I had more than 30 seconds for that, but what we can do, I have a lot of experience in the affordable housing area. As I said, I work with Habitat for Humanity, and while on the Summit County Council, I approved over 500 units of affordable housing in Summit County. It's an all-of-government problem, affordable housing. If we have cities and counties are willing to zone for it, I think what the federal government can do is target grant money for those cities and counties to help them build affordable housing. If we can get them enough money, for instance, to buy land and build infrastructure, all of a sudden you can take 25 to 30% off the cost of housing.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, same question.
Burdensome regulations are ruining our housing market, and when it comes to that, California, the most expensive housing market in the country, is a reflection of that. Much of what's happening in California is a result of ideological intent to try to move an environmental savior process when in fact these regulations don't make any difference on the environment. They only raise costs for average citizens. So in the state of Utah, we do it well. It's a hands-off regulatory environment on multiple levels, and when government gets involved, things get worse, in fact.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, let's shift to the topic of the budget. For decades, voters have heard about a coming catastrophe resulting from federal budget deficits, yet the balance keeps climbing despite which party controls Congress. Has the notion of balancing spending with revenue at the federal level just become meaningless?
I live on a budget. You live on a budget. I don't understand at all why our federal government can't live on a budget. Besides, they don't care about our future. I care about our future. As I've mentioned, we have my wife and I have 8 children. I have 9 grandchildren. Everything I do for you, if you hire me for this job, everything I do will be seen through the lens of what impact will this have on these children and grandchildren that I have and that you have, and we need to look to that future. We cannot continue to put our spurious spending process on a credit card that ultimately our children will be left to pay the debt on that. So I'm deeply invested in that. How do you accomplish that? I've heard that question hundreds of times over the past several months on the campaign trail. I'm a family doctor. I've lived in Medicare and Medicaid for 25 years. I've worked in those systems. 3 systems, Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, are driving most of the national debt issues that we confront. And we need to make sure those systems work well. But I know in those systems where the fraud, where the waste, where the abuse is. And as a family doctor, as a proven legislator with a conservative record, I can actually work with people, and I've done that routinely on complicated legislation in the state legislature, to build a consensus and move things forward. In a state legislative position as well as federal, it's a team sport. No one person, including the President of the United States, can do things by themselves. And working on Medicare and Medicaid, we can save a bunch of money for our future and help reduce that national debt. I'm invested in making that happen.
Okay, Mr. Wright, same question.
Yes, recently I had a Zoom call with some advisors from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. And what they told me is that 87% of the future budget deficits are coming from entitlements, just as Senator Kennedy mentioned. How would I attack that? I think we need some concrete ideas rather than just rhetoric. What I would do, number one, I would remove the taxation cap on Social Security. That'll take Social Security, make it solvent out into 2046 rather than 2033. The biggest problem, though, with Social Security is we don't have enough workers to feed tax money into the system. What they tell me is that if we have 3 workers per retiree, we're good. Social Security balances out. That's not happening. It's at 2.8 right now. It's going down to 2.2 in the next 10 to 20 years. We need more workers in the system, and that will bring up another subject I'm sure we'll be talking about later, which is immigration reform. We need to massively increase legal immigration into the country and get people on the working rolls. As far as Medicare goes, good progress is being made on negotiating for pharmaceutical prices. That has to be a key, and we have to expand that. And again, adding more workers to the pie will help with Medicare. And I think in terms of Medicare and Medicaid costs, maybe doctors can charge a little bit less to the system.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, I want to stay with the budget and give you a minute to answer this question. Would you vote for omnibus spending bills, especially ones that include items that are, kittywampus to you?
Regular order budgeting is a vital component of Congress. It's a constitutional component, and as a constitutional conservative, I support regular order budgeting in the federal government. As I've already mentioned, it's shocking and frankly embarrassing and dangerous for our country to continue to spend money as we currently do. So I will not vote for omnibus budget bills. The reality is we need to get back to regular order budgeting. It's not that hard. You spend the money that you take in and try actually not to spend that much. We have overspent for generations now, and sadly, our future generations are vulnerable as a result of that. I've said over and over again, and I've been campaigning and working on these sort of things for over a decade now, that our national debt is the greatest security threat that we have to this country. If we can't pay our soldiers and we can't buy the armaments that we need and the ammunition that we need, then we as a country are in deep trouble. So I'm deeply focused on improving our national debt, and I believe working together we can make that happen.
All right, Mr. Wright, same question, 1 minute.
Sure. Actually, Senator Kennedy and I agree on regular order. I think that is definitely the way things should be run in Congress. And the current Republican House has said that they wanted to do that, and they've been complete failures in the last 2 years. I think the reality is, as one person in the in Congress, I'm not going to change another 400 votes. I will certainly do my best at trying to get us to maintain regular order, and if I'm on any of the budget committees, I will push us in that direction. But at the end of the day, if you have a CR that you got to pass or you shut down the government, I think it's better to pass the CR rather than cause a government shutdown.
All right. Next up, we have a student question from Ellie Soulier. And Mr. Wright, you get it first.
Congressional District 3 is home to thousands of students beginning their careers. How will you support and incentivize the formation of small businesses in your legislative decisions?
I think listening to the Harris campaign on that, I think, is very instructive. She has a proposal for increasing the tax benefits for small business to $50,000 from $5,000 right now. I think that's an excellent idea. I think we also have to look at some of the regulations that are imposed on small businesses, and at the small business level, maybe give them a little break. If you're below a certain size company, go a little easier on some of those regulations. I think the biggest thing we can do is make sure we have a successful economy. And building an economy for the many rather than just a few, I think, is the most important thing we do to provide customers with money in their pockets to spend money in those new small businesses.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy.
Thank you for that question. It's outstanding. Many successful large businesses actually started at BYU, just as your question reflects. And I happen to be a small business owner myself. And my answer to that is get the government out of the way. The reality is, for me to even get my doctor's license here in this state cost me hundreds of dollars and months of waiting time before I could actually get my license, when in fact I'd already been through 4 years of medical education and 3 years of residency training. So state and federal government can actually get in the way by putting onerous burdens and regulations on these people that are trying to open their business. And my intent would be to focus on reducing those burdensome regulations. In fact, in the state of Utah, we focused on the regulatory sandbox, which is an opportunity for small businesses, especially innovative new small businesses. Artificial intelligence is a good example of that when there's no regulation in those areas and they're trying to fit regulation onto those, that the regulations would be on hold so that these new entities would have an opportunity to function without regulations and have a better chance to survive.
Thank you, Ellie. Mr. Wright, I'd like to stay with this topic with a follow-up 30-second answer. Many Utahns are concerned about the state of our economy, particularly, I think, about rising costs. As Congressman, what specific steps would you take to address these concerns and mitigate the impact of inflation?
I would say two things. And number one, we talked about earlier, is affordable housing. My plan to target tax money grants to cities and counties to help them build affordable housing. When we look at anybody's individual budget, housing always takes up the biggest portion of it. The other thing we have to do is consider that over the last 4 decades, we've had trickle-down economics, suppression of unions that have caused a massive wealth transfer from the middle class to the super rich. We have to change policies, and I can't talk about that anymore because my time is up.
That's right. Dr. Kennedy, same question.
Government spending has been a tragedy for inflation. We can't buy average groceries without putting it on a credit card. For many families, they're struggling to make ends meet just because the government decided, particularly with COVID, which I worked as a doctor through COVID. I was not a state legislator at that time. Working as a doctor, and with the flood of money that came from federal government, money that we didn't have in the first place, money that we just sent out in society with billions of dollars that went off into fraudulent activities that we are now finding out about, that government spending has created what Jerome Powell called over and over again just a few years ago, transitory inflation, that we continue to struggle with today. So get the government out of the way once again. They can't spend money that they don't have. They should not put it into programs that are going to be wasteful and also used inappropriately.
All right, Dr. Kennedy, I'd like to shift to the topic of social media. Many are concerned about the access to social media and its impact on children. Congress has not passed a law regarding kids and the internet since 1998. And though recently the Kids Online Safety Act passed 91-3 in the United States Senate, it seems to be dead on arrival in the House. So if elected, what solutions would you pursue?
I'm deeply concerned about our children. In fact, as a doctor working with the youth of our state, I've seen more depression and anxiety in the past 5 years than I've seen in the prior 20 years of my practice. And social media is likely a part of that. There are a lot of things happening to our youth that are very concerning. When I was a child, the phone was on the wall of my house, and it had a long cord, and the only privacy you could get with your phone was this is alien to all the children, young people that are listening to this, is you had to pull the cord all the way into the bedroom, shut the door, and try to have a private conversation. Now, everybody in this room has a private phone that they can even text and call people, and they're contacting. Most of them, this is such a boring debate anyways, and I hope it stays that way, frankly, but they're not even listening to me. They're actually watching some sort of sports feed of some sort. But when it comes to social media, they need to be regulated, but not at the expense of free speech. And that's a big deal when it comes to some of these social media platforms. We do not want to deplatform these entities when it's a modality for people to continue to communicate and share ideas. So as a thoughtful conservative legislator who wants to solve problems, I will listen to all sides with a deep interest in protecting our children and our grandchildren from nefarious intent underneath the social media. And we know, we've seen some of the documents on the inside of these organizations, that their intent is to addict these children, pull them in, and never let them out. It sounds like heroin dealers or fentanyl dealers that are coming across the border. So I'm focused on the safety of our children, but we need to protect free speech as well.
All right, Mr. Wright, same question.
Yeah, I think we all agree that it's a problem for our youth. And I would certainly vote for that Senate bill that you referenced when I'm elected to Congress. But I think we probably need to do more than that. And I think you start with parent control over the social media techniques. We've had some proposals that I think Facebook has some proposals now that under a certain age, you have some of the media that's fed to you is restricted. But it's so easy to beat that. When a kid signs up for it, all they have to do is say they're give a false age. Maybe what we should be doing when teenagers get phones, the parents are required to set up their social media before they can go any further. So that's going to require some regulation of the cell phone industry and our cell phone carriers, but that might help. The reality is the kids have a tough time these days, and teenage suicide is a problem in our entire state. Bullying is anti-LGBTQ rhetoric on the internet drives people in that direction. So as adults, we need to control what we put out in the media on those particular issues.
Okay, we have now reached the halfway point of the debate featuring invited candidates running to represent Utah in the 3rd Congressional District. With us tonight at Brigham Young University are Republican Mike Kennedy and Democrat Glenn Wright. I'm Leah Murray, moderating tonight's event, sponsored by the Utah Debate Commission. We encourage you to submit questions for the candidates and post comments during this live broadcast. Use the hashtag UTDebates on social media. Let's get back to questions for the candidates. And ironically, we're going to have the next one from social media. So actually, Dr. Kennedy, people are watching. Mr. Wright, this one goes to you for a minute and a half. What are your ideas to keep energy insecurity from hitting our rural communities?
Very good question. Excellent. We are in a period of over the next, probably 10 to 20, 25 years where we transition our energy sources from fossil fuels to zero carbon fuels. That is going to have a major impact on our fossil fuel producing counties. I visited them all. I attended I've spent 3 visits in the Uinta Basin. I attended the Uinta Basin Energy Conference a couple of weeks ago. We also have some major opportunities in this state. There's new developments in geothermal energy. And what we find is that the Uinta Basin also has possibilities for geothermal energy. So as we transition some of those fuels out of our use patterns, we'll have an opportunity to transfer more geothermal, zero carbon energy into those use patterns. The reality is, what I found out during this seminar, our oil is fairly expensive out there, but our natural gas is pretty cheap. It's very competitive on the market. But eventually, we're going to stop using natural gas for electrical generation. When that happens, there's an opportunity to turn that natural gas into ammonia, which will probably become the marine fuel of the future. So we can turn the Uinta Basin around from producing fossil fuels for land transportation to producing fossil fuels, but zero carbon fossil fuels for the marine industry.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, same question.
The United States of America is an energy-rich country, and we should be utilizing all the resources that we have available. And the brightest star, and I always loved Governor Herbert's statement, as the brightest star on the flag is Utah. And it has abundant resources in the form of coal, natural gas, as well as nuclear, and geothermal, and solar, and wind. We can leverage all of those in this state, and we should leverage all of those. Talking about the future and that lens that I use, thinking about my children and grandchildren, is artificial intelligence in our energy needs is, I look at, and in fact, as a doctor, I'll just say, is electricity is what allows me to even speak to you, breathe. It allows my heart to move. It's inside of our bodies, and if we don't have electricity in our bodies, we're done. In the United States of America and in the state of Utah, it's the same thing. If we do not have a cheap, safe, deployable version of energy that is clean and environmentally sound and looks to the future, then as a country, we will be overrun potentially by other countries. So I'm invested in all of those resources, and I believe Utah specifically has so many resources, and my friends in the Uinta Basin, God bless you for all the work that you do there. It is hard work, and it is done in a clean, capable fashion by good people in Utah. We all want clean water. We all want clean air. None of us want our environment ruined, and I agree with Glenn. He's entirely right, is the people in the Uinta Basin know how to do that. The people in Utah know how to do that to the benefit of the whole country if we're able to leverage that.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, just talking about artificial intelligence, which you've mentioned a couple of times, what role should Congress play in the advancement of AI in our country, particularly in terms of balancing innovation with job protection, privacy concerns, and the potential for AI to reshape important industries?
Right now, there's an arms race with artificial intelligence all over the world. Everybody is pursuing this because even in my practice right now, artificial intelligence is being used for some of them, some of my providers that I work with, to actually help them with their chart notes and considering the issues of the patients. So it is a powerful resource. Yeah, I don't believe it's going to ruin the country. There are those that think about the Matrix or other sort of science fiction-y thoughts about what's going to happen with our future if we allow any sort of artificial intelligence to take over. But I believe Utah does it well, and that goes back to the regulatory sandbox that I've already mentioned. Is with the regulatory sandbox, when you have a new entrant to any sort of business venture, is the regulations are put on hold, appropriately so. Some regulations don't fit the new entity that has come into play. And if we try to fit the square peg into the round hole, what we'll end up doing is depriving that business of the oxygen that it needs to survive, and it ultimately will die, potentially ruining our opportunities for that business entity to succeed. So in the case of artificial intelligence, I see a couple of things. First, we should have a light hand. Washington, D.C. and Congress is a meat cleaver. We need a surgical scalpel. I do worry that the federal government gets too involved in these things when they don't even know what they're doing with that. So a light-handed touch, but when regulation is necessary, that we regulate appropriately so that these businesses can move forward. And in the case of artificial intelligence, we need to win that arms race and innovate so that we can dominate throughout the world. And we will, because the great people in the United States, and particularly in Utah.
All right, Mr. Wright, same question.
Yes. Artificial intelligence. The U.S. is the leader currently in artificial intelligence. Most of the key artificial intelligence companies are U.S.-based, and they require a lot of energy, and that gets back to some of our energy discussions. But in terms of the potential perils or benefits of this in the future, I think they're mostly benefits. I think artificial intelligence is going to make every one of us more efficient. We're going to be required, though, to change our educational system. How do we get the most out of artificial intelligence? Because it can make every one of us more efficient. And the more efficient we are, the more productive we are, the richer we are, both individually and as a country. But there are serious issues that we have to face. I think the biggest one is really on the battlefield. My job 50 years ago, over 50 years ago now in Vietnam, was selecting targets. There's opportunities now for artificial intelligence to select targets. And I've read stories of the potential for drone wars between clouds of drones between two opposing armies. We need to have very serious controls over the final decision making in that process. And that's one area where we really have to zero in on what the future controls are.
All right, Dr. Kennedy, a follow-up with AI. We are standing here, at BYU. How do you see AI impacting education? What are some promises and some pitfalls? 30 seconds.
Well, after a long time in school, I do wonder if artificial intelligence could potentially be a better professor than some of the professors that I had. Now, I'm sure the professors at BYU are much better than the ones that I had, but I do believe all industries are going to benefit from the opportunity to use artificial intelligence. I was thinking also about the Mission Impossible movie with Tom Cruise and the fact that artificial intelligence, the new one, is reflective of some serious danger there. But when it comes to higher education, there's great opportunities for artificial intelligence to teach if we're willing to leverage it, but also regulate in a safe fashion.
All right, Mr. Wright, same question.
Yes, I believe artificial intelligence is going to particularly affect the white-collar jobs, the intellectual jobs, the knowledge industry jobs. It's going to either make you more efficient or you're going to be out of the picture. So that's where we have to train our education system to really leverage artificial intelligence. There are some areas that are not going to be particularly vulnerable to artificial intelligence, and that's our construction industry. We have to have very robust training programs for our construction industry and the hands-on industries that are probably not going to have much effect of artificial intelligence.
Okay, Mr. Wright, next question is for you first. Utah's rapid population growth and agricultural demands are placing increasing strain on limited water resources. As a member of Congress, how would you work with federal, state, and local entities to craft innovative water policy that meets the needs of urban and rural communities while ensuring long-term sustainability? You have 1 minute and 30 seconds.
Thank you. This is one of the biggest environmental and economic issues I think we have facing us in the West. I think number one, we have to attack climate change. The West is becoming hotter and drier, and our water sources are being are under siege. I used to meet every year when I was on the Summit County Council with the Summit County Farm Bureau. And the ranchers there, just before our 2 heavy snow years, told me that they were already culling their herds. So what do we do about that? We've got 2 really water basins we're concerned about here in Utah. The Colorado River Basin, which affects, I think, about 7 of our counties in the district, and the Great Salt Lake. But they have similar issues. In the Colorado Basin, the states are going to have to agree on what the division of spoils are going to be in the Colorado River Basin, or the federal government is going to make that decision for us. So we need to cooperate with the other 6 states. Within Utah, we've started some good efforts in the state legislature, and we've adjusted our water rights policies, which are beneficial to that effort. But we're going to have to put money into buying those water rights so they get to the Great Salt Lake. The irrigation optimization programs that are out there, both in the state, and I think we have to have the federal government add into those programs, can allow our agricultural users to produce as much product with half the water. So we're going to have to invest in those programs for our agricultural users, and make sure that extra water is placed back in the water source, the water course, whether it's the Colorado River or the Great Salt Lake.
Thank you. Dr. Kennedy, same question.
We've already talked about electricity in the body and electricity in society, and now we'll talk about water, which I'm a big fan of water. You should mostly drink water. I'm going to recommend that as your doctor tonight. So if you want to think about that, the Red Bull and the Full Throttle, I'm not going to recommend those, but I know a lot of people use them regularly. But I'm a big fan of water, making sure we have clean water. And in the state of Utah, there's a few things. The national government does have a role to play in this. And Leah, for you and the listening audience, all 15 or 20 of you that are out there, we're grateful to have you here. But part of the thing about the Olympics that are coming in 10 years is that is an opportunity for every one of the federal delegation to go to all of the rest of our national representatives and senators, as well as the president, and ask for resources to build infrastructure. And I'm a big fan of us building infrastructure for the Olympics for 2 weeks for people from all over the world to come here to the state of Utah, and then we get to use that infrastructure for 80 years. I'm fine with that. And so I am dedicated to making sure that any money that we can get from the federal government to help us build the infrastructure necessary to improve our water infrastructure in the light of the Olympics, certainly, as well as others. Big fan of that. If we need to build dams and do other things, then we certainly should do that. Second thing, the state legislatures are actually working on that with the flip the strip and paying people to reduce grass, and also to encourage farmers to be better at this. Final thing I'll say is innovation is the name of the game here. Is Elon Musk builds Starlink, and we have internet everywhere when it used to be plugged in at the wall. We have talk of colonizing Mars. How about we just figure out water is 2 hydrogen molecules, 1 oxygen molecule. Can't we make water some way, or desalinate? And the answer from the ocean, and the answer is we can do all of those things if we have abundant, cheap energy. And so energy is going to be a big focus of mine as well, making sure we develop all of those resources so we can innovate and actually even make water is something that I know we could do if we were willing to do it.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy. We are seeing shortages of healthcare providers specializing in women's health, especially in rural areas, after the Dobbs decision. Do you believe there is a need for federal programs ensuring there are enough healthcare workers to support women's health?
I am grateful for 25 years to have served older people and younger people, women and men, and making sure that their needs were addressed. And when it comes to women's health, I was just telling one of my students that I was with yesterday that when I can serve a woman in a family, then it's highly likely that the whole family will come, because when it comes to healthcare, much of it is driven by the females in our society. And thank you for helping us in working through those processes. So once again, the National Congress is a meat cleaver, not a surgical scalpel. So when it comes to the Dobbs decision and how do we deal with those issues, is we need good healthcare providers. And as a state legislator, I've made sure to enhance the likelihood that physician assistants and nurse practitioners can practice to the utmost of their licenses. As an MD myself, I certainly have a broader array of skills, and I've spent a lot of time in my medical training to make sure that I could do that. But I believe a lot of our physician assistants and nurse practitioners can rise to other levels of service and be able to serve the people. But when it comes to healthcare industry and how do we innovate, we need to enhance the capacity that people have to go to these training programs. We need to make them easily available and allow the competition of the best and brightest to rise to the top. And in fact, it's interesting that we have BYU as our sponsor of this venue. Is they're opening up a new medical school, and I applaud them for that. As a medical institution, when they have that developed, is we'll have an opportunity to bring more practitioners to bear so that we can serve not just the women of our society, but everybody with their vital health care needs.
Okay, Mr. Wright, same question.
Yes, you prefaced it with the discussion of the Dobbs decision, and that, of course, is across the country driving practitioners away from states with severe abortion laws, similar to what Senator Kennedy voted for. It's fortunately been held up by the state Supreme Court. That is going to cause a problem with practitioners studying and moving into the state. The University of Utah has already recognized that in the drop of residency requests in Utah. I think there are some things we can do, though. When I entered college in 1965, the Vietnam War was starting. I joined Air Force ROTC and passed the flight physical. And the Air Force came to me and said, "Hey, Cadet Wright, how would you like to get a scholarship from us? Just give us 4 years after pilot training." I think we can do that for the medical profession. Start to have some scholarships that are targeted, and maybe create a medical corps. So doctors with these scholarships would have to practice in rural areas during the first part of their career. And that could both decrease, hopefully, the cost of medicine. We get more doctors, and maybe they wouldn't have to make as much money because they're not burdened with student debt.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy, he said your name. Would you like a 30-second rebuttal?
Yeah, he said a couple times about doctors making so much. It's really interesting, the Byzantine nature of healthcare and its delivery. Medicare and Medicaid are big drivers of that. What he hasn't mentioned yet is the fact that we have pharmaceutical companies and also hospitals that are primary drivers. And I resent the fact that people suggest the rich doctor who's golfing all the time. That's not me. I see a lot of people, and it's a 10 to 12-hour day on a regular basis. And the idea of fat cat doctors, not that I don't like cats, they're great, but fat cat doctors sitting around not doing much work for a lot of money is not a good characterization of the hardworking healthcare providers that are out there that I know of.
Okay, Mr. Wright. Congress has been unable to reach agreement on immigration reform for decades. A comprehensive, negotiated bipartisan reform package was defeated earlier this year. What would you do to address the immigration issue? Would you support bipartisan legislation to solve the crisis?
I would certainly support bipartisan legislation, although I have to point out that it was defeated because former President Trump wanted to make it a campaign issue, and he rolled out his essentially racist, fear-mongering platform that he can put out for the country to listen to for the next few weeks, and cause that legislation to be killed. It really wasn't that bipartisan. Yes, it was bipartisan, but it really had all of the Republican talking points in it, primarily just border security. Border security is part of the problem. If we don't fix the reasons why people try to come here, we will not fix the immigration problem. We have to fix it in the countries they're coming from, help improve their economies, and their judicial systems. They can get rid of some of the crime. But we need workers in this country. We need to have more legal immigration to this country, as I spoke about earlier in talking about the national debt. We need to have comprehensive immigration reform that was not included in that bill to bring more workers, more immigrants into our society. For our entire history, we've been a welcoming country. The state of Utah is a welcoming country. The Utah Compact from over 10 years ago, where our political and faith leaders welcomed people into the country, is the model we should use in creating comprehensive immigration reform in Congress.
Okay, thank you. Same question, Dr. Kennedy.
The chaos at the border is a massive disaster, and the Biden administration has been feckless in their efforts this way. And Kamala Harris was the border czar. She refuses to accept that title, but she was responsible for the border and has been ineffective in managing the border crisis that we have. Fentanyl's coming across the border and killing our young people with overdose deaths, intended by nefarious players such as China, who are actually China and Mexican drug lords, are sending this drug across the country and ruining the lives of our young people, destroying those lives of our society. So I'm deeply focused on, first, our border needs to be secure. Second, we need to improve legal immigration. My father is a naturalized American citizen. I'm a first-generation American on my father's side. And I'm proud of the fact, and I'm grateful to join the stage with my good opponent here, is I am grateful that a young man and his family could come to this country legally, and my dad became naturalized, and his child, who grew up in difficult circumstances, but nonetheless can stand before you as a candidate for Congress, as somebody who's been able to go to medical school and law school, raise a family in this great United States of America, because the United States of America is a beacon for all people all over the world. We have our problems. I know we have our problems. I see them on a regular basis, but we work together to try to solve those problems, and this country as a beacon on the hill gives an opportunity for people to have hope all over the world. So we need to improve legal immigration, and at the same point with those legal immigrants, they build our economy and they make our country better. Welcome to the country, but come here legally.
Okay, Dr. Kennedy. Proponents for strengthening the southern U.S. border say it's an essential part of stopping illegal drugs from crossing into the country. Is stopping the flow of drugs more important than addressing the domestic demand for the substances that is driving the trade?
The war on drugs is a massive problem. Our drug problems in our society are a massive problem, and I see them on a regular basis as a doctor. And also, we've tried to address those in our state legislature. These are importantly compelling issues that we confront, but we cannot have a porous border. I know there are drug dealers in the United States of America, but we also have them for nefarious purposes outside of our borders. And with our feckless current administration allowing the border to be porous, there are people coming over here. We don't even know who those people are. We don't know what substances they're bringing with them. And as a result, the lives of our citizens are being challenged and even destroyed by these terrible policies on the border that the Biden administration and what Kamala Harris has failed to do as well. So when it comes to that, we need to make sure that people have hope. I believe, and in fact, I've had suicides in my practice, patients that have killed themselves just recently. It's been a tragedy on their families. People are losing hope. I'm very disturbed by the amount of anxiety and depression, as I've mentioned before, that I see in my patient population, and I want to help them. But the answer is, based on Utah's approach, we are a family-oriented state. We do it well. We help each other. In fact, I was listening to a leader in our community talk about the fact that when she was going, her mom was in the hospital and the family was going to foster care, the children, that she had a neighbor come over and those neighbors helped those children until the mom could get out of the hospital. That is what we do in Utah. We help each other, we give each other hope, and we are the brightest star on the flag. We can help each other through these things and give hope when people feel hopeless and ultimately turn to drugs and destroy their lives.
Mr. Wright, same question.
Border security is certainly an issue. Most of the fentanyl that comes into the country comes through legal ports of entry, hidden in vehicles. There were provisions in the bill that was proposed in Congress that would have installed detectors at the border crossings for this. It's been a number of months now since that bill was killed, and that was solely the responsibility of Donald Trump. Any fentanyl deaths in the last couple months are on him. We need, but the drug problem it's both a supply and demand problem. Go back to my corporate career. I made my first trip to Colombia in 1993. They were in the midst of civil wars. And when I met our board of directors in our Colombian subsidiary, one of the members came up to me, said, "Senor Wright, your drug problem is causing our revolution in this country. You need to get control of your drug problem." And that's what we have to do here. We need more rehabilitation. We need more counseling. We need to create a society where people don't feel like they need to use drugs. A lot of people got on drugs because of the pharmaceutical industries oversubscribing painkillers. That's on us, but we need to fix that. But I'm going to make a prediction. 10 years from now, we're not going to have a fentanyl problem. You know why? Because the miracles of modern chemistry are going to produce something cheaper and deadlier.
Thank you. We've reached the end of the debate. Each candidate will now have a minute to deliver a closing statement. A coin toss determined Mike Kennedy will have the last closing statement. So now let's hear from Glenn Wright.
Thank you to BYU and the Debate Commission for hosting this debate tonight. It's been a great opportunity. I wish we could have gone longer. Good wealth is good health, and we need good personal health, good economic health. We're at a crossroads right now. We're at a fork in the road. We can go down one road in this election where candidates are soliciting votes through racist tropes, fear, hate, destroying people's rights in family planning, or we can go down a different path. I solicit everybody here and all the voters out there to join me on a path to prosperity and freedom, where we protect your personal freedom, we build an economy for the many, not just the few, we protect the environment, and we enhance our national security by building alliances with countries with like values. And thank you for listening to me tonight.
Thank you. Dr. Kennedy.
The United States of America is at a critical juncture. We need serious-minded people who have the skill set and capacity and interest to work diligently with other people to solve these critical issues. Otherwise, the American dream could be extinguished by our own failures to address those issues. I'm a family doctor, and as a doctor, I'm a trained listener. As an attorney, I'm a trained advocate. I know how to fight for justice. As a small business owner, I know how difficult it is to meet payroll and make sure that we are compliant with government regulations and that we pay our taxes as honest businesses should. And as the father of 8 children and grandfather of 9 children, one of whom will receive his baby blessing in just a couple days before this general election, I am focused diligently on making sure that our grandchildren do not look with shame on me and those of us in this room at our failure and inability to address these vital issues that they'll confront that are blowing up in their faces because we failed to confront them. I'm Mike Kennedy. You can find out more about me at MikeKennedyForUtah.com, and I would be honored to have your vote.
We've heard tonight from Republican Mike Kennedy and Democrat Glenn Wright. They are running to represent Utah's 3rd Congressional District in the United States Congress. Thank you, candidates, for your desire to serve in public office. Election Day is Tuesday, November 5th. Contact your county clerk if you have any questions about making your vote count in this election. We greatly appreciate Brigham Young University and BYU Broadcasting for providing the venue for this debate. We are also grateful to the Larry H. and Gail Miller Family Foundation, Zions Bank, and the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation for their generous support of the Utah Debate Commission. This debate and others from previous years are available online at utahdebatecommission.org. I'm Leah Murray. Thank you and good night. Let's give them a round of applause. I actually don't know what happens next.
That's going to begin in just a minute. If you do need to leave, we ask that you please exit up the stairs onto the 2nd floor, and there'll be ushers there to
Senator Kennedy. It seemed like a pretty civil debate. I wonder what you thought about getting your message out. How do you feel you performed tonight?
I'm just grateful wow, that's really loud, but I'm grateful that you all came. I'm grateful for this audience and the sponsors of this debate. And I'm grateful for my opponent, although I don't know if it was on tape. He said something right at the end when I shook his hand that was frankly shocking. So maybe you can get the tape and listen to that part. But I believe we should have civility and thoughtfulness. And that last comment that he made was not civil and it was not thoughtful. But that's for everybody else to figure out if they want to, on BYU campus, hear the kind of spurious, shocking claims that he made. But when it comes to this, I think we need thoughtful people that are willing to work on important issues. And I don't think we need to denigrate or name call. I don't think we should use foul language as we're working on these important issues. And maybe my opponent doesn't necessarily agree with that sort of thing. But I think it was fine. The public part was, but there's also private components to this that I think we should be the same in public as we are in private. And I plan on adhering to that if these good people of Utah are willing to support me in this race.
Do you care to expand on what he said?
No, I don't, but there's tape on it because we're all taped up and BYU has that tape. So you can all find out what sort of comments he made right here while we were just finishing up, which I found that to be shocking.
Well, Senator Kennedy, you had come out definitively on your support for getting funding from the federal government for infrastructure projects in Utah ahead of the Olympics. As someone who is a fiscal conservative, can you just expound on why you think that's an important role for a congressman to get federal funding for this Olympics? The
Olympics are a national venue. The United States of America has invested in its Olympic venues to make sure that they are functioning well. And the nice thing about Utah is we know how to take $1 and stretch it into $5 worth of value. We do that on a regular basis. In fact, in this campaign, I've done that myself. So I am a fiscal conservative, and I'm focused on reducing our national debt. At the same time, we want Olympics that are not only as good as what we've done before, but even better than before. And to that end, I've already organized, and I'm grateful for my state legislative leaders, including President Adams and members of the House leadership, met with the federal delegation at my effort to try to come together and talk about issues that are revolving around state and federal collaboration to make sure that they're working well together. And I plan on doing that actually every 6 months, and I've already set a standard suggesting that the Friday before General Conference, that the federal and state leadership should get together and actually talk about how things are going on both venues and making sure, not just for the Olympics, for general, how are we working together? There's only 6 of us in the federal delegation in the state of Utah. If the good people of Utah are willing to hire me for that job, there's only 6 of us. California has 52 congressmen plus 2 senators. We are overwhelmed in numbers, but we all know that you can still have small numbers, but if you work effectively together, we can actually move the agenda forward for the good of the state of Utah. And when it comes to an Olympic venue, we need to make sure that this venue is not only respectable, but outstandingly performing, because in Utah we do things right. And I believe that there's so much more with the Olympics coming to Utah that we can demonstrate. We can show people that working together with divergent opinions, we can actually work together and accomplish things and still have fun with the competitions that are necessary. So I believe the whole country, 10 years from now, will have its eyes on the state of Utah. And I think that's a good thing for us overall. But to build tomorrow, we need money today. And these infrastructure projects are really expensive. And if there's any interest on the national stage, and if I can help that interest on the national stage direct money to the state of Utah for infrastructure that's good for the Olympics and subsequently useful for our people for decades to come, I'm all in.
If there was one infrastructure project that you'd like to see in the next 10 years, what would you like to work on in Congress?
There's not just one, there's dozens. And in fact, I'd work with my friends at UDOT as well as the state leadership to figure out where those are. But double tracking of the front runner is one of those things, extending front runner north to south, and we need more east to west corridors as well. But we've talked about water during this debate, and the reality is we need water infrastructure as well. We need innovation and technologies to develop water so that when all the world is focused on this place, but also at other times, we have the capacity to actually actually feed and water and transport these people. In fact, when we had that state legislative leadership meeting along with the federal delegation, President Adams talked about heliports. The fact is that we need to get off the ground. We need to get into the air when we can. And the idea of some of our venues being connected by air instead of by road is exciting to me. It's a component of this. We have drones that are out there. And as I say, we can put a man on the moon. We think about colonizing Mars. There are ways to do this, and we need to kind of get out of the mindset of putting down more asphalt and concrete and just blazing across our land. There are many ways for us to do this, but I'm going to keep my eyes open. And when it comes to infrastructure, we have many needs, particularly in my district, Senate district that I currently represent, including the Thanksgiving Point interchange. That is a massive issue. But all along the Wasatch Front, there are issues. And if we can extend Front Runner down to some of these more rural areas, we can have bullet trains going back and forth. People can live in one place and work in another place and do it in a clean environmental fashion and expanding our economy and getting the congestion out of the Wasatch Front. So I think that that's one thing that I would particularly be interested in, but I'll take good advice from anybody as to how we can leverage those dollars to make sure Utah's infrastructure is sound.
Dr. Kennedy, why do you believe the immigration policy is impacting Utah's fentanyl crisis?
The lack of immigration policies. So part of the issue that
is affecting Utah's fentanyl crisis.
Yeah, big concern of mine is just that we don't have a policy on the border. Our border is porous, and people are coming across the border. We don't know who these people are, and fentanyl is coming with them with the intent to addict and destroy the lives of our people. So as a doctor working with these people and seeing the devastation not only on the individual who's addicted but also their families, I'm deeply invested in trying to prevent that from happening. And we need to secure our border. Our border is our border. It is not the drug lord's border, and we need to make sure that we know everybody that's coming across, who these people are. And I am entirely certain that we need to improve legal immigration. So people that want to come, I want them here, but they need to come legally like my father did.
Follow up. Would you do anything to try and curb the fentanyl crisis by addressing domestic drug creators?
It's all hands on deck, absolutely. And we know that those are there as well. And it's not just fentanyl, it's not just opioids. There are many versions of addiction that people have. But when it comes to that, for us to focus on all aspects of that is vital, because our young people are at stake. I've seen so many young lives destroyed and damaged by these substances, and I believe that we have a responsibility as a state, counties, cities, states, and also the federal government. We have a responsibility to work on those things. You're welcome. In fact, on a side note, people say, well, how can we do this? And I say, so for me, we didn't even know COVID existed until 2019, 2020 is when we first started understanding it. Now I have a 15-minute nose swab that I can do in my office, that I can have my staff swab the nose of a patient, and I can identify within 15 minutes that they have COVID. Can we not develop a fentanyl or any other number of illegal, dangerous substances, swabs of fingers, swabs of bodies generally, to make sure if there's even an inkling of fentanyl on that individual, they are not let across the border? We have a rapid, real-time result that tells us that this person, no matter who they are, is potentially possessing of dangerous substances. You're not coming across. So I believe with technology and intent, innovation, we can make these things happen so that our country is safer.
So abortion was brought up during the debate, and your opponent expressed opposition to Utah's abortion law. Do you think that abortion is a national issue and that something you try to address in Congress, whether it be ensuring a right for abortion or a nationwide ban?
We've worked diligently as a state legislature on this issue, and when it comes to the policy, I believe it is a state issue, not a federal issue. As soon as we pass federal laws, they're brought to the courts and ultimately overturned. They can be overturned one way or the other. And if we constantly have this back and forth, it's just going to create more problems. So as a provider of health care for women on a regular basis, I'm a big fan of birth control. In fact, I've made it, along with my legislative colleagues, we made it possible to get birth control over the counter. You can buy it without a prescription in this state. Intrauterine devices, as well as Nexplanon type devices, these long-acting contraceptive versions. I've been a proponent of that for my entire career. I believe that before we even talk about the termination of a pregnancy, which is a massive issue in our society, we should talk about adequate access to health care. And when a woman has the opportunity with ease to take charge of her own reproductive circumstance, then we don't even have to have the conversation of what do we do with this pregnancy now that it's happened. So all hands on deck with that as well. I believe there's many solutions to this, but we need to, I'm pro-life in the form of the mother, I'm pro-life in the form of the child, is we need to protect both lives and promote both lives and help these people. It's not just no abortions, it is if a mother chooses to have her baby, we need to be there to support her and that baby, not just for the short term, but for the long term, to help them make those positive decisions. We've worked on that in the state legislature, and I would be very careful in the congressional service, because once again, it's a meat cleaver, not a surgical scalpel there in Congress. We need to be careful what we do.
Thank you, team. That's our time. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Wright, what did you tell Senator Kennedy after the debate was concluded?
I thought did that get on tape? I told him he was he had a good line of BS, very professional.
Why did you tell him that?
Because I think a lot of his answers didn't really answer the question. That's why. Yeah, probably half of his answers were just rhetoric. Did not answer the question.
Did you feel like that was the appropriate thing to tell a debate opponent after the debate?
Why not? It showed him what I thought of him. I don't think he deserves to be elected to this office. I think he will be a danger to the country and to Utah.
Do you not think that kind of way of treating political opponents is a danger to the country?
Not when you're telling the truth.
What is it about your opponent do you think is a danger to the country?
He supports Donald Trump. In the words of General Milley and virtually every other senior cabinet official that has worked with Trump, he is the most dangerous person who ever got close to being in the White House. Most dangerous person in the White House. He has no morals. He's only out for himself. He tried to overthrow the government. He stole classified documents, and now we're finding out he's having conversations with the war criminal from Moscow on a regular basis. I wonder if he's talking about some of those classified documents. The man is a serious threat to our Constitution and to our national defense, and Kennedy supports him, as do the entire Republican delegation. Trump's entire thrust of his campaign, from the time he came down the escalator in 2015, has been one racist, hate-filled trope after another. Nobody in this state on the Republican side has even denounced his racism. Come on, Kennedy. Can you at least not agree with the racist comments that are coming out of your presidential candidate? Governor Cox, give me a break. Yeah, I know Governor Cox personally. I like him personally. I know Representative Curtis, and I like them personally. But it's time for you guys to step up and call Trump out on his racist inclinations.
Well, a lot of voters in the 3rd District probably are going to vote for Trump. Given that interaction that you had with Senator Kennedy after the debate, I wonder how you would address these voters that you're trying to win over.
I think I talk the issues. If they're listening to the issues, I hope they'll vote for me. I don't have to like my opponent.
Well, switching gears here, your opponent did focus on his willingness and excitement to go to Washington, D.C. and secure funding for infrastructure projects in Utah ahead of the Olympics in 2034. What do you see as a congressperson's role, or your role in Congress, in securing funding for Utah's Olympic venues and infrastructure projects?
That's certainly a major part of the job over the next few years. But I think there are much more important things to be concerned about. Climate change is one of the biggest threats we have to Utah. There's probably going to be enough snow here for the Olympics in 34. Currently, the Olympic Committee is talking about doing a 20-year rotation. Highly unlikely that we will have enough snow in Utah when we get around to 2054. Climate change is an issue, and we didn't get a chance to talk much about it tonight, but climate change is a critical issue. Drought and water availability in the state are critical, and if we don't stop climate change, until we stop climate change, it's only going to get worse. The hurricanes that have savaged the southeast right now are going to become regular items. Right now, fortunately, we're getting some snow in here tonight. The Yellow Lake fire up on the Wasatch-Duchesne border, very close to Summit County where I live. It's closed down Highway 35 for a couple of weeks now. Normally, we would have had some snow on the ground by late September up there, and that would not have been an issue. In fact, the Forest Service said at that time of the year, they typically let it burn because it'll typically burn itself out and burn out some of the underbrush. That's what's facing us with climate change. The fire seasons are getting longer, the snow seasons are getting shorter.
So the last 2 winters have been some of the best snow years in Utah history.
Yep.
But you're predicting that by 2034 we might not have snow at all for the Olympics?
No, I think we'll have it in 34. I think it's highly unlikely if we're in a 20-year rotation, we'll have it in 2054. Highly unlikely. That's what the climate scientists are telling us.
So what do you think Congress needs to do, say, in your first 2-year term to address climate?
I think the biggest issues there are really continuing what's in the Inflation Reduction Act on encouraging electric vehicles, heat pumps, and basically electrifying our transportation system and our building heating system, and producing zero carbon electrical energy through additional resources like geothermal. When I was out at the Uinta Basin Energy Summit a couple of weeks ago, I saw a map from SITLA. And I actually visited the Provo site down in Beaver County. They're about 2 years from producing, I think, 400 megawatts of power from geothermal. It's all being sold to California at this time because it's basically an R&D project, so it's fairly expensive. But as they work out those techniques, and it's in terms of the jobs that are in that industry, it's the same drilling rigs that are used to drill for oil and gas. So kind of the same people that are working in the oil and gas industry can be producing geothermal energy. Looking at a map that I saw from SITLA, the potential geothermal resources in this state are unbelievable, and they're completely dispatchable. They'll be pumping water through these geothermal sites, and they go from 0 to 100 just by turning the switch and pumping more water through the system. It works really well with solar and wind. And solar and wind are the cheapest sources of energy right now, but of course they're variable. So we need to have dispatchable baseload energy like geothermal to work with them. Utah can be a powerhouse of zero carbon energy in the future if we devote our resources to it. And that will be one of my goals in Congress.
Mr. Rick, there's been a lot of talk about fentanyl crisis, opioid
Yeah.
crisis. A lot of that is tied to immigration. What would you do if you became a congressman to address the U.S. companies that are also flooding the market with opioids?
Good question. So you're talking about the pharmaceutical industry? Yes. We have to have much better controls on that. I think we have to start educating doctors to prescribe these serious painkillers on a less frequent basis. I actually had both of my knees replaced years ago, and the doctor prescribed, at that time, it was, what was that? No, Percocet, yeah, something like that. And I took one of them and I said, no, I think I better not do this. So I soldiered on through by just taking Motrin. And that was good enough for me. We have to train people to do that. But I think the other thing can happen, AI, working with the pharmaceutical industry. Let's see if we can produce some painkillers that are not addictive. Maybe that should be a goal of the pharmaceutical industry.
Mr. Wright, I'm from the Daily Universe, so we report for BYU, and something that's been a continual issue that's been brought up in Congress and federally is student loans and student debt. What would you like to see Congress act upon in regards to the kind of some of the struggles that college students face with not just affording to pay tuition, but also just to live generally?
Yeah. I think the student debt crisis has been a scam on students. We've created a student loan system that instantly gives loans to students, not knowing how they're going to be able to pay them off in the future. Some students come out with $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 worth of debt just for an undergraduate degree. And the servicers of those loans are held harmless. You can't even declare bankruptcy to get out of those loans. It's a guaranteed funding source for the servicing companies. I think we do have to do something about that in Congress. How much? Next year, Congress is going to be going some massive tax and budget negotiations because the Trump tax cuts expire. That's the time when we attack that. Do I know how much we can devote to that at this time? No, but we can make that part of the budget negotiations and see if we can come up with a package that will help students reduce their indebtedness and reduce the cost of education. We've had 40 years of trickle-down economics in this country, where we've had a massive wealth transfer from the lower class, the middle class, to the upper class. We have to change direction in that. And the way we do it is by lowering the cost of education to increase the productivity of every one of the members of our society, whether it's in university education or in vocational education. And we have to increase the efficiency of our productivity of our society by increasing our infrastructure. That's what I would do. And where do we get that money? Well, guys like Musk and Bezos and Zuckerberg. I think I read there's 1,000 billionaires in the country right now. I think they can get a little bit more.